Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark. We are in 1 Samuel chapter 1. We're going to be starting in verse 3 this lesson, but before we begin, Jeremiah 15 verse 16, Thy words were found, and I did eat them, and thy word was unto me the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. Now, as we begin here in verse 3, let's read verse 3, and it says, And this man went up out of his city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. And the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, they were there. Now, it says here this phrase, the Lord of hosts. Now, this title for God is used almost 300 times in the Bible. And the very first time that this title, the Lord of Hosts, was used for God is right here in 1 Samuel chapter 1 and verse 3. Now, it means Lord of the armies. And, God is the God of the stars. In Isaiah 40, verse 26, and he is the Lord of all the angelic hosts in Psalm 103 verses 20 and 21. And he is the Lord of the armies of Israel in Exodus 12 verse 41 and chapter 46 verses 7 and 11. So yes, God is the Lord of hosts. He's the Lord of the armies of this universe. As Lord of hosts, it means that God rules over all, and that he is sovereign over all. Israel's history is one of many sins and failures, but it shows us that God is still on the throne and that he rules over all even when people don't want him to rule. God will bring to pass his purposes. God's going to do it anyways. God created the heavens and the earth, and God is going to rule over it whether man wants him to or not. It also says here in verse 3, and this man went up. Let's read here. It says, and this man went up out of his city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. Now, just going to church does not make a person a Christian. You've always heard the saying, if a person is born in a car dealership, it doesn't make the baby a car. Well, as we will see in these next few verses, that religion has a tendency to bring out both the best and the worst in some people. Elkanah's love for Hannah was intensified when they went to the house of God to worship God there. Going against the cultural norm in those days, Elkanah placed a high value on Hannah simply because of who she was. What she was on the inside, and not for what she could give him, which was a child. Back in those days, even in Jesus' time, when you got married, it was important that you married somebody, especially for a man, we married a woman that would produce a child. But here, Elkanah goes against the cultural norm, and he loves Hannah for who she was. And even though she didn't produce a child for him, yet he still loved her. With or without children, Elkanah's life cried out that Hannah was most precious to him. But with Peninnah, her mean-spiritedness was brought out at the place of worship. She mocked and teased Hannah's barrenness, even to the point of bringing Hannah to tears. So here they go, Elkanah, Hannah, Peninnah, and Peninnah's children, they go to Shiloh to worship God there. And when they get there, you see that when they get to the house of worship, that Elkanah's love for Hannah is brought out. It's magnified there. But with Peninnah at the house of God, it was her mean-spiritedness that was brought out at the house of God. But because Hannah was being pulled between the two of them, between a caring love that came from Elkanah and a mocking ridicule that came from Peninnah, the real treasure that was in Hannah's heart was given an opportunity to be released. Her humility and her trust in God would shine at the place of God, at the place of worship. She was a woman of character and a woman of faith. And it was at the place of worship where she was willing to give her best to the Lord. And as we said a few minutes ago, sometimes going to church or going to the house of God can bring out either the best or the worst in people. With Elkanah and with Hannah, it brought out the best. With Peninnah, brought out the worst. This is the way it is with some people. Religion or church reveals what is in people's hearts and where they stand. Maybe you've experienced that with family members or friends. You talk with family members, you talk with friends, and you start talking about, Christ and the Bible, and it can sometimes bring up a wall, and you begin to understand where people are going to draw the line in their relationship with you. And it says also in verse 3, in Shiloh, that they went to the house of God in Shiloh. Now, we first see the tabernacle and the Ark of the Covenant set up in Shiloh in Joshua chapter 18 and verse 1. This was approximately 1444 BC, about. For approximately the next 273 years, the Ark of the Covenant and the Tabernacle of Moses stayed in Shiloh until we see it here now in 1 Samuel chapter 1 and verse 3. And it's approximately 1171 BC now. Then, after this, the Philistines, they war against Israel in 1 Samuel chapter 4. And they take the ark in 1 Samuel chapter 5 and verse 1. And it seems that when the Philistines came and they take the ark, it seems that they go to Shiloh and possibly destroy the city or the dwelling, the area of Shiloh. Now, in 1 Samuel chapter 6, verses 21 to chapter 7 and verse 2, which is about 20 to 30 years later, the Philistines, they return the ark to the children of God. But the ark will never return to Shiloh again. The rest of the tabernacle of Moses without the ark, eventually it goes to the city of Gibeon in 2 Chronicles chapter 1 and verse 3. And then it is not until Solomon builds his temple that both the tabernacle of Moses and the ark are reunited together at Solomon's temple. And that's seen in 2 Chronicles chapter 5 and verse 5. So the ark is going to be taken away from the children of Israel and from the rest of the tabernacle of Moses. And it's going to be a long time before it's reunited by King Solomon at his temple. This was in approximately 1005 BC. This means that both the ark and the tabernacle were separated from each other for about 135 years. Now, it says here in the last part of verse 3 that the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, they were there. Now, it says that they were the priests of the Lord. It says, but they were only priests of the Lord by name, not in their heart. As it says in chapter 2 and verse 12 of 1 Samuel, they were sons of Belial, which means that they were worthless men. The God they truly served was their own lusts. Now, if you study that, some commentators will say sons of Belial means that they worship Belial. No, they didn't worship Belial. The phrase sons of Belial means that they were worthless. That was a phrase used back in those days to mean that you were a worthless person. If you saw somebody and they were working, but they were slacking off and they were lazy, you would just say, they're a son of Belial. They're a worthless person. And that's what was said. It doesn't mean they worship Belial. Because Hannah, she's going to say, don't call me a daughter of Belial. Don't call me a worthless woman. And we're going to see that in a little while. You know, there are many pastors and elders and deacons and Sunday school superintendents and song leaders who attain their position in the church, yet their heart is to ultimately serve themselves. They are not humble before God with a desire to really help people to have a relationship with God. With them, it is all business. They have attained a position that they may have worked hard to attain for many years. But, like Hophni and Phinehas, some people are born into this position. Some people are just born into it. They have a natural talent or a reputation that made it easy for them to be given the position. You know, it's kind of difficult for a church when, a banker comes into the church and they start becoming religious. It's kind of tempting to want to appoint them as the church treasurer. Or somebody else comes in and they just have a natural ability to lead people, so you want to appoint them to be the Sunday school superintendent. And you can't do that. A lot of churches do that, but it comes from has to be a person who's brokenhearted. It has to be a person who loves God and serves God. And some people just have a natural ability for some things. And churches need to distinguish between a person who's spiritual and a person who just has natural ability. Spirituality is not inherited. A person cannot be born into being a spiritual person. It takes humility and a dying to self so that Christ is our life, and to being Christ is our life, to being our spiritual walk with God. Here Hophni and Phinehas, they were born into their position, but in their heart they weren't priests of God. They were, in a sense, worshipers of themselves. There are many people in churches doing things in the church that they should not have been appointed to do. Always look for the spiritual person. They may not be the most educated or the most talented person in the church, but their hearts are prepared for the work. Don't look at the out, like Samuel said, don't look at the outward, or God told it to Samuel, don't look at the outward appearance. God says, I see the heart. I see the heart. And we need to choose people for church positions that have a heart, a humble heart of prayer, a heart that's given over to God. Now, let's start in verse 4 here, and it says here, and when the time was that Elkanah offered, he gave to Peninnah his wife and to all her sons and her daughters portions. Now, why does it seem that the unsaved and even the ungodly and sinful people get better things or have a better life than the saved and who are seeking after God? Why is it? I mean, I'm sure if you've been saved for any amount of time here, you've seen unsaved people, you've seen people who are kind of like carnal Christians, and they seem to have a lot. They seem to have more than the more spiritual person in the church. And yet, we always ask ourselves, why is it that these unsaved people, they seem to have more and they're being blessed more than the saved people who are serving God? This has been a stumbling block for many Christians in all ages of life. Job also spoke of it. Let's read Job 21. Let me get to Job chapter 21. Yeah, Job 21. Let's read verses 7 through 15. And he says here, in verse 7 it says, why do the wicked live, become old, yea, and are mighty in power? Their seed is established in their sight with them, and their offspring before their eyes. Their houses are safe from fear, neither is the rod of God upon them. Their bull genders and fails not. Their cow, their cattle, they have calves too, and casts not her calf. It's like they're always, they have great bulls, they have great cows, and the cows are always giving birth, and none of them are stillborn or anything like that. Everything's hunky-dory with them. Verse 11, and they send forth their little ones like a flock, and their children dance. They take the timbrel and harp, and they rejoice at the sound of the organ. They spend their days in wealth, and in a moment they go down to the grave. Therefore they say unto God, depart from us, for we desire not the knowledge of your ways. What is the Almighty, that we should serve him? And what profit should we have if we pray unto him? And that's we're going to read another one here in Psalm 73, but Job spoke about it. He was the first one to speak about why is it that the ungodly are being blessed. It seems like their crops grow, their flocks flourish, the cattle flourish, and everything is nice. They're singing and dancing and everything's nice for them. And yet the godly, they're having a hard time. Asaph also said the same thing. He was perplexed by the same dilemma. So in Psalm 73, we're going to read a lot of this psalm because he says the same exact thing. It says here in verse 1, truly, God is good to Israel, even to such as are of a clean heart. But as for me, my feet were almost gone. My steps had well nigh slipped. For I was envious at the foolish, when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. For there are no bands in their death, but their strength is firm. They are not in trouble as other men, neither are they plagued like other men. He's talking about the rich and the wealthy. Verse 6, therefore pride encompasses them about as a chain. Violence covers them as a garment. Their eyes stand out with fatness. They have more than heart could wish. Oh, yes. Verse 8, they are corrupt and speak wickedly concerning oppression. They speak loftily. They set their mouth against the heavens, and their tongue walks through the earth. Therefore his people return hither, and waters of a full cup are wrung out to them. And they say, how does God know? And is there knowledge in the Most High? Behold, these are the ungodly who prosper in the world. They increase in riches. Now, verse 13, let's read verse 13. And it says, truly, I have cleansed my heart in vain and washed my hands in innocency. This is what Asaph is saying. He's looking out at the ungodly and the corrupt person, and he sees their prosperity. And and he looks at his own life, and he says in verse 13, truly, I've cleansed myself in vain and washed my hands in innocency. So basically, the godly look at the wealthy and the prosperous person, and they think that they have been good for years for nothing. Why have I done this? Why have I prayed all these prayers and gone to church all these years? And why have I read the Bible and taught in Bible school, in a Bible study? Why have I taught in Sunday school and, lead singing in the choir? Why have I done all these things when the ungodly is prospering? And look at my life. I'm not prospering. And it's like I did all of this for nothing. Now, verse 14 says, for all the day long have I been plagued and chastened every morning. If I say I will speak thus, behold, I should offend against the generation of thy children. When I thought to know, listen, so now Asaph is beginning to ponder on this situation. He says, when I thought to know this, it was too painful for me. Painful. Asaph is thinking about why the ungodly are prospering and the godly seem to have it really difficult in life. And he says, every time I think about it, it brings pain. I'm disturbed about it. Now, the key verse is verse 17. The key is verse 17. And it says here, until I went into the sanctuary of God, then I understood their end. Asaph said, I've contemplated it. I suffered a lot meditating on why the ungodly prosper, why the godly are persecuted and have hard times. And he says, it wasn't until I went into the house of God, then I understood their end. You know, it is only It is only when we humble ourselves and get into the presence of God that we understand that their end, listen, their end, the end of the prosperous ungodly is what? It's a lake of fire. It's a lake of fire. That's what their end is. Their end is a lake of fire. But we don't, when we're out in the world, we don't understand it. But when we get into the house of God and we humble ourselves to get to know God, then we fully understand that the prosperous ungodly, their end is a lake of fire. Listen, don't dare envy the ungodly who seem to be prospering. Don't you do it. Don't you dare envy the ungodly who are prospering or seemingly prospering. Don't do it. Don't do it. Take what God gives you and be happy with it. And be humble and thankful for what God gives you. Don't envy the prosperous ungodly. But there is another reason why they have been able to attain their wealth and their power. There's another reason why the ungodly have been given all this. And that is because God, out of his great compassion and grace, he blesses them with things before they go into a godless eternity. God is showing himself as kind and generous to the ungodly so that they will not be able to say that God was not good to them. It is true that every ungodly person, not every ungodly person is wealthy. That's true. The fact that any person on earth has air to breathe and food to eat means that God is already gracious to them. The fact that you woke up today and you're sucking air into your lungs and you have food to eat, that means God is already gracious to you. But to some, God chooses to allow them to have an abundance of worldly things. Again, not every ungodly person is wealthy or prosperous. Some people are. Some people, God blesses the ungodly with great wealth. Only God knows the reason why some prosper and others don't. But God is allowing them a measure of happiness and comfort on this earth before they are sent to a place where there will be never, ever any happiness and absolutely no comfort whatsoever. God is giving them a measure of happiness and comfort out of his grace and so that they can't stand before God at the white throne judgment and say, God, you weren't good to me. Yes, he was. Yes, he was. The simple fact that we have food to eat and air to breathe and clothes to put on, that means God's gracious to us. Beyond that, God owes us nothing. He doesn't owe us anything anyways. But simple fact that God gives us those things means God's gracious to us today. All right, we're going to continue on in verse 5, next lesson. But until then, walk with the Lord. I know he walks with you.